Welcome to our deep dive, and this one is all about the Democratic Party, especially their relationship with income inequality. We're going to be taking a look at Listen, Liberal.
Ah, yes, Listen. Liberal by Frank Thomas.
Exactly, Frank Thomas. It's going to help us understand how the Democrats have approached inequality over time, going way back. And it's going to help us answer the big question, did the Democrats really abandon the working class?
Well, Frank Thomas actually makes a pretty strong case for that.
Okay, so how does he start? Where does he begin with this?
Well, he kind of lays it all out. He shows us just how bad the income inequality problem is here in the U.S.
Okay.
It's not just that the gap is wide. It's that it just keeps getting wider and wider, even when the economy is supposedly doing great.
Yeah, he uses some pretty striking statistics to
Yeah.
kind of drive home that point. I was reading that from 1997 to today, the bottom 90% of Americans, they haven't seen any real growth in their income.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
And all the gains have gone to the top 10%.
Yeah, right. And that difference between what the reports say about the economy and what people are actually experiencing, in their own wallets, that's part of the frustration that so many people feel.
Yeah.
Remember back in 2014,
Yeah.
the stock market was like breaking records, but over 70% of Americans felt like we were still in a recession.
Yeah.
That just shows you those numbers don't really tell the whole story.
No, they don't. Okay, so Frank sets up this problem of runaway inequality.
Yeah.
Then he says that the Democrats, who are supposed to be the party of the working class, they haven't really addressed it effectively. But wait a minute. Didn't he campaign on helping the working class? How does Frank explain that?
It's a good point, yeah.
Apparent contradiction.
He argues that despite some populist rhetoric, Clinton's policies really just ended up favoring Wall Street and this group he calls the professional class.
You're the professional class.
Highly educated folks, doctors, lawyers, academics, that kind of thing. Yeah. You might even be surprised to learn that Clinton's economic team, they were so closely tied to Wall Street that Time magazine actually dubbed them the Committee to Save the World.
It's like they thought whatever was good for Wall Street was good for all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
But looking back, particularly at the 2008 financial crisis, that's clearly not always the case.
Yeah.
And Frank points to certain policies from that era, like the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act.
Oh, yeah.
As contributing to that deregulation.
Yeah, Glass-Steagall, that was meant to prevent banks from doing really risky things.
Oh, right.
And getting rid of it. That had a huge impact. Think about the housing crash.
Yeah.
That was fueled in part by the kind of risky lending that Glass-Steagall was supposed to stop.
So Frank is saying that the Democratic Party under Clinton started moving away from, traditional working class issues and more towards this professional class. But how did that even happen?
He traces it back to some reforms that happened way back in the 1970s.
Okay.
Took power away from labor unions, gave more to this professional class. And there's a good anecdote about this journalist who was watching, the Obama administration. He was really struck by how many of them had gone to Ivy League schools.
Oh, wow.
Called it a valedictocracy,
Yeah.
Being ruled by the top of the class.
So it's almost as if the party became dominated by people who had benefited the most from higher education.
Yeah.
And saw as the answer to everything.
Right.
Is Frank saying that the professional class is intentionally keeping other people down?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Isn't that a bit harsh to say that they're trying to rationalize inequality?
Yeah.
Isn't it possible they just believe in opportunity and equal opportunity?
Well, and that's really the heart of what Frank's getting at. He's not saying that they're doing it intentionally, but by focusing so much on education as the answer, they might be missing what's happening to people who don't have college degrees,
Yeah.
and who are struggling in an economy that values those credentials so much.
Okay, so instead of trying to create policies that directly address income inequality, they're just putting all their hopes on education.
That's one way to put it.
But what about the people who don't go to college?
Yeah.
What about the people who can't afford it?
Yeah.
Or the people who just aren't cut out for academia? Are they just out of luck?
And that's where Frank sees a real problem, is that this education as a panacea, that kind of approach can lead to this judgment oh, well, you're not successful. Well, you must not have tried hard enough in school.
Yeah.
It puts the blame on the individual, not the system.
So that brings us right to the heart of Frank's argument, right? That this whole embrace of the professional class, this education is the answer mentality, that's actually made the Democratic Party less effective at actually dealing with the problem of income inequality.
Yeah, and to really illustrate this point, he dives into some specific case studies looking at how this all played out under Presidents Clinton and Obama.
Okay.
And you might be surprised by what he uncovers.
Okay. Let's get into those case studies. Frank looks at Clinton and Obama. We talked about Clinton a bit, but let's go a little deeper.
Sure.
Clinton campaigned on all these populist ideas, but then according to Frank, he kind of enacted these policies that ended up, widening the gap between the rich and the poor.
Right.
One example is NAFTA,
You got NAFTA,
the North American Free Trade Agreement.
a big part of Clinton's economic agenda.
Huge. But a lot of critics say that NAFTA led to job losses here in the U.S.
Definitely. A lot of companies moved their factories to Mexico, right?
To Mexico, yeah, for
Yeah.
those lower wages. So even though the economy was, growing overall,
Yeah,
a lot of working class people felt left behind
absolutely.
because those manufacturing jobs were disappearing.
Right.
And it wasn't just NAFTA, it was also, Frank talks about the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which we
Yeah.
mentioned before, as another example of a policy that maybe, helped Wall Street more than it helped Main Street.
Exactly. And Frank brings up that Time magazine cover again, the one that called Clinton's team the Committee to Save the World, to kind of show just how cozy the administration was with the financial industry.
Yeah.
It was this idea that whatever was good for Wall Street was good for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so we're seeing this trend, emerging under Clinton.
Yeah.
But what about Obama? He came in with so much hope, so much promise.
Right.
A lot of people thought, oh, maybe he's the next FDR.
Yeah, a new deal.
A New Deal. Did Frank find a similar pattern with Obama?
Well, according to Frank, despite all the high hopes, Obama kind of followed a similar path.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he points to those bank bailouts after the 2008 crisis. That's a big example.
Oh, yeah.
The focus, he says, seemed to be more on saving the financial institutions, right?
Uh-huh.
Than on like holding those, executives accountable or helping homeowners, avoid foreclosure.
It's like the priority was making sure the system didn't collapse,
Right.
even if that meant that ordinary people were still struggling.
Yeah.
There's this, I read this anecdote about Timothy Geithner.
Oh, yeah.
He was Obama's Treasury Secretary.
Right.
Someone asked him about a program that was supposed to help homeowners,
Mm-hmm.
and he apparently talked about how it would help the banks,
Mhm.
not the homeowners themselves, which, kind of just reinforces that idea that
Yeah.
the administration was more focused on protecting the system
Yeah.
than on helping the people who were really hurting.
Yeah. Right. And that kind of leads into another big idea in the book, which is this rise of the innovation economy and how the Democrats have really embraced it.
So we're talking Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
startup culture,
Yeah,
this idea that technology is going to solve all our problems.
Yeah, exactly.
But Frank's saying that could actually make inequality worse.
He's saying, yeah, be careful what you wish for.
How so?
Well, he argues that all this emphasis on, disruption and innovation, it often leads to job displacement.
Okay.
Like think about Uber,
Yeah.
TaskRabbit.
Yeah.
These platforms, they create opportunities for some people.
Yeah.
But they're also disrupting these traditional industries,
Yeah.
making it harder for people who don't have those tech skills to find work.
So it's like we're moving toward this gig economy.
Right.
Where everybody's a freelancer, an independent contractor,
Right.
without, the security, the benefits that come with a traditional job.
Right. And Frank highlights this quote from Eric Schmidt,
Who's that?
former Google CEO.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He said, if you want to solve the economic problems of the U.S., create more entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And Frank sees that as kind of problematic
Okay.
because it's putting all the responsibility on individuals
Yeah.
to adapt to this rapidly changing economy
Right.
instead of addressing those underlying power imbalances
Yeah.
that are driving those changes to begin with.
It's like saying, oh, you're struggling. Just go start a tech company.
Right.
That's not really a realistic solution.
No.
Especially if you don't have the money, the education, or the desire to be an entrepreneur.
Right. It ignores all those systemic factors.
Yeah.
And the fact that not everybody has the same opportunities.
Right.
And it's not just about the tech industry. Frank argues that this innovation economy mindset has really kind of permeated the Democratic Party's thinking.
Hmm. So we've seen how this shift towards the professional class, this embrace of the innovation economy, played out under Clinton and Obama. But what does Frank say about, Hillary Clinton?
Right.
She was running for president when he wrote the book.
Right.
Did he think she was going to be any different?
Well, he kind of suggested that the Democratic Party, as it was then, was more comfortable talking about meritocracy, innovation, the creative class,
Yeah.
than they were about, directly addressing economic inequality.
Okay.
And he saw Hillary Clinton as likely to kind of continue that trend.
So even though she tried to connect with working class voters during the campaign,
Right.
he wasn't convinced that her policies would really be that different.
He pointed out that while she might have used some populist rhetoric,
Yeah.
her overall approach seemed pretty aligned with that same professional class innovation economy mindset that he was critiquing.
So we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about, the Democratic Party, their evolving relationship with income inequality, the rise of the professional class, the innovation economy. We've seen how these trends have played out under different presidents. What's Frank's overall conclusion? I mean, does he offer any solutions, or does he just kind of leave us with, a bleak picture?
Well, he doesn't try to sugarcoat the problem,
Okay.
but he does offer some ideas for, how we can move forward.
Okay.
He argues that we need to shift our focus away from this very narrow idea of meritocracy
Okay.
and recognize that there are all these systemic factors
Yeah.
that are creating and perpetuating inequality.
So it's not just about, individual effort
Right.
and making sure everyone has access to education.
It's bigger than they
We
can.
need to look at the big picture.
Right. He wants us to rethink some of our basic assumptions about, how the economy works
Oh, okay.
and the role of government in addressing inequality. And he even suggests that we need to kind of rediscover the power of collective action.
What does that mean?
Things like labor unions, social movements, other forms of organizing
Yeah.
as a way to push for more just and equitable policies.
So it's not just about, waiting for the government or the tech industry to
Right.
solve the problem.
It's about people coming together,
It's about people coming together. Yeah.
demanding change.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's calling for a pretty big shift in how we think about economic justice and who benefits from the system as it is.
Yeah. Frank's basically arguing that the Democratic Party,
Yeah.
even though they say they're the party of the people,
Right.
they've kind of lost touch
Yeah.
with the needs of working class Americans.
Right.
And he's saying that, we need a much bolder vision, a much more ambitious vision if we want to create a society
Right.
that works for everybody, not just those at the top. So, we've been focusing on Frank's critique of the Democrats on this national level, but he also goes local.
Yeah, he zooms in on Massachusetts
Oh, Massachusetts. Okay.
to show how these trends, they actually play out in real life.
Okay, so why Massachusetts?
Well, it's interesting, right? It's considered this liberal stronghold
Yeah, it's very liberal.
and a big hub for innovation.
Yeah, Massachusetts. I mean, you've got Harvard, MIT,
You can see
all those cutting-edge tech companies.
it's like the model for the knowledge economy.
Yeah.
And on the surface, it seems like it's working. You've got Boston, the capital,
Yeah.
thriving tech sector, relatively strong economy.
Yeah.
But, Frank doesn't just focus on the success stories.
Okay.
He also takes us to places like Fall River.
Fall River, where's that?
It's this old mill town about 50 miles south of Boston.
Okay.
It's been hit hard by deindustrialization, high unemployment, poverty.
Yeah.
And that contrast, between Boston and Fall River, it really highlights what Frank calls the two-class system.
The two-class system.
Yeah.
Okay.
The same policies that are fueling all that economic growth in Boston,
Yeah.
they're making things worse in places like Fall River.
So you have these two different worlds existing side by side within the same state.
Exactly.
You've got, the winners of this knowledge economy
Yeah.
concentrated in Boston.
Yeah.
And then you have those who've been left behind
Right.
in places like Fall River.
Yeah, and that's where Frank's critique of the Democratic Party's focus on, meritocracy, it really comes in.
Okay.
He's saying, this focus on just what individuals achieve, it ignores all those big systemic
Yeah.
factors that create these regional differences.
It's like saying, oh, if you're struggling in Fall River, you just need to like work harder, get a
Exactly.
better education.
Right.
But that's not really fair.
No, because it ignores the fact that the opportunities just aren't the same everywhere.
Right.
And it puts the blame on people
Yeah.
instead of looking at, how those policies, those economic forces have created these unequal
So
conditions.
what's the solution? And does Frank give us any concrete steps to bridge this divide between these two classes?
Well, he doesn't really lay out a specific plan,
Okay.
but he does say we need to stop focusing so much on just individual achievement
Yeah.
and start thinking more about how to create a system
Yeah.
that provides more opportunities for everyone, no
Yeah.
matter where they live or what their background is.
So it's about, the government's role in making sure that everyone has a fair shot.
Exactly. We can't just rely on the market
Yeah.
to solve these problems.
Hmm. Sounds like he's calling for a pretty big shift in how we think about economic justice.
He is. He wants us to really look at, what we think makes a society fair and equitable. And think about whose interests are actually being served by the system we have now.
Well, this has been a really interesting deep dive into, listen, liberal. We've covered some really complex issues, some challenging ideas.
Yeah.
Hopefully you, the listener, are leaving with a better understanding of
Yeah.
what's at stake here.
And maybe even a little inspired to go out there and make a difference.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Democratic Party and their relationship with income inequality. Keep thinking about these questions, and we'll see you next time.